Your hands were made for greatness. Mighty hands for painting, paneling, and clicking the submit order button on HomeDepot.com to get that duvet. And these Egyptian cotton towels delivered right to your door. Do more with decor at the Home Depot. Save up to 30% on select bedding and bath. Now at HomeDepot.com. More saving, more kinds of doing. Valid on select items online only. Free delivery on select items $45 or more. Enter promo code BEDBATH15 at purchase for an extra 15% off. Visit HomeDepot.com for more information.
Welcome to Creating a Family, talk about adoption and foster care. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that's a little more near and dear to most of us than we would like, and that is de-escalation techniques for parents of kids who have experienced trauma. Like I said, this one is a near and dear topic for all parents, and particularly, I think, parents who have kids who have had early life struggles that are influencing their behavior and ability to cope. Great topic, great show. Here's a sample of what you're going to hear.
We're going to be talking mostly about TBRI today, which stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. And really, it is just a parenting technique that helps us look at kind of what the behavior is saying. You know, what is the message that our child is trying to give us? Kind of thinking of that behavior as more of an unmet need.
This show is brought to you by Creating a Family. We are the National Adoption and Foster Care Education and Support nonprofit. I'm Dawn Davenport. I'm your host and the director of Creating a Family. And you can find us and all of our resources online at creatingafamily.org. And we have a lot of resources on this particular topic under our challenging behaviors section on our site. You would hover over adoption or fostering, go to the A to Z resources, and scroll down to challenging behaviors. The Creating a Family show is underwritten by the Jockey Being Family Foundation, whose mission is to strengthen adoptive families through post-adoption services. As their founder, Deborah Waller, chairman and CEO of Jockey International, says, one failed adoption is one too many. You can support their mission by buying a bear or a blanket at their website, jockeybeingfamily.com. And one of the things that Creating a Family does is partner with organizations who believe in our mission of providing unbiased education and support to foster families and adoptive families. One of our partners is Vista Del Mar. They are a licensed and accredited nonprofit adoption agency in the LA area with over 65 years of experience helping to create families. They have 3 adoption programs, a private infant program, an international program, and an adoption through foster care program. Today we are talking about de-escalation techniques for parents of kids who have experienced trauma. Our guests today to talk about this important topic are Cameka Hart. She is the Therapeutic Family Specialist at Buckner Children and Family Services. And we also have Jennifer McCallum. She is the lead post-adoption counselor for Buckner Children and Family Services. Welcome both Cameka and Jennifer to Creating a Family. We're so glad to have you here today to talk about this, as I said, really important topic and frustrating topic to parents of all sorts. Jennifer, I wanted to start with you. I think it would be helpful if we laid some basic groundworks of core principles that parents can keep in their heads, because when a kid is escalating, it's really hard to keep anything in your head. It's hard not to escalate right along with them. So I can say that as someone who speaks from experience. So let's talk about some of the core practices, and then what I thought we would do is then go through some scenarios and see how we might apply those practices. So if you can start us off with the basics.
Sure, that sounds great. And we're going to be talking mostly about TBRI today, which stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. And really, it is just a parenting technique that helps us look at kind of what the behavior is saying? What is the message that our child is trying to give us? Kind of thinking of that behavior as more of an unmet need. And so what TBRI does is really gives us some strategies to use and just some things to think about, not only when we're correcting behaviors, when we're needing to correct some of those meltdowns that happen, but it helps us kind of look at what else might be going on. Is there kind of a sensory need? Is there a nutritional need? And obviously, along with what's the behavioral need right now? And some of those basic values that TBRI really encourages using. We hear a lot about timeouts, and TBRI is very, very focused on co-regulating with our child and using time in versus time out, kind of bringing that child closer to you, versus sending them away, for a break. We really focus a lot on resolution, talking about teaching children to ask for compromises, giving them choices versus just consequences right away, and which just helps teaching and problem solving. But I think something that's really important and that is so hard and for all of us, as parents, is just in the midst of some of that frustrating behavior, whether you're at the grocery store and trying to get, last-minute errands done after a long day of work, is just trying to kind of get back to the focusing on that child's, preciousness, and what, again, kind of what their behavior is saying. What's that unmet need? What are they really needing? And I think the neat thing about TBRI and what makes it so helpful and able for parents to kind of just follow along is it gives very specific strategies that just help us be very proactive. It gives us some short, easy sort of scripts to teach children, life value terms, and then ways to just practice that. We love to role play and go through and just help kids really understand and have something to pull from when they're in that moment of anger and not being able to express what's going on.
Okay, then to summarize this, see if I can summarize some of the core practices, core principles that we need as parents to keep in mind when our children are having difficulty regulating, having difficulty calming down, getting back in control. One is to co-regulate with the child. Don't send the child away. Keep the child in your presence, time in.
Yes.
Another one is teaching the child some coping techniques, and one of which is to ask for compromise. And to help them figure out how to problem solve. And the third one you mentioned was to work on try to understand what the child's unmet need is, because the behavior is likely a reflection on an unmet need of some sort that's being inappropriately displayed. The need is not being explained in a way that is very helpful for you as a parent, but so you have to look deep.
Right.
Okay.
You have to be a little bit of an investigator.
Yes.
It's always just about trying to do that detective work and kind of go,
Okay, and then the last one, I'm not sure it's really a separate one, but that is to focus. I liked how you said that. Focus on the child's preciousness. Don't lose sight that this child has value, and that's easy to say when they're sleeping at night and they look angelic. It's not so easy when they're face down in the grocery store aisle screaming. So
no, it's not.
Cameka, are there any other core principles we need to keep in mind before we move on to some scenarios to apply these principles?
Thanks for asking. I think that one of the things that I try to make sure that parents understand before they even engage with the child is just making sure that they're able to kind of match the child's behaviors, and as well as just being in a position to where they're at their level. And then always I try to teach parents before a child becomes out of control is to try to engage them playfully, making sure that they have eye contact, and when they are getting ready to touch them to get their attention or something like that, that they used healthy touch as more of a guide than a direction. And then making sure that their voice is something that they have in control, being authoritative but without being scary, I guess you could say, and just being mindful and aware of everything that's going on with their situation, with their body language. As Jennifer said, being a detective, being able to understand the environment that you're in, understand the child, and what their body language might be giving off, as well as you being aware of what you might be giving off as well, because our children are able to read us just as well as we are able to read them.
Cameka, what did you mean by match child's behavior at their level?
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like to teach parents to mirror what their children are doing, not necessarily, if your child is throwing things, I don't want you to do that. I do want you to, however, be able to increase their safety. So say, for instance, if a child is sitting on the floor and their legs are crossed and they have that closed off behavior, I would encourage a parent to sit on the floor with their legs crossed but face them, so that the child sees that you want to be connected with them. And I think sometimes children don't understand what connectedness looks like, and so we have to be teaching at all times in that moment. And so that's why I say match their behavior. Sit down with them, be on their level so that they feel that connectedness with you.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. You don't mean that I should also throw a tantrum in the middle of the aisle, although I must admit that's kind of tempting to lay face down in the aisle and throw my arms around too. But I assume that's not that would not be productive,
Correct.
Tempting as it might be. All right, let's jump to, we ask our, Creating a Family has a really large online community, and we ask them to send us some real-life examples of children who are escalating behavior, and we're going to work through these scenarios to apply some of the principles that you two have just said. This is from Doreen. She said, this is a little long, but I'm going to go ahead and read it all because I feel like it captures well some of the frustrations of parenting and working with kids who are struggling. She said, I could give you a million examples, and that is just from this last week. My child goes from 0 to 60 all the time. Everything can seem to be going well, and then something happens to flip the switch. Usually the something that flips is being asked to do something that she doesn't want to do. I have listened to every single Creating a Family course on challenging behaviors and read every single article on your site. We have made progress, but it feels like we still have such a long way to go. I should add that my daughter was adopted at birth with no known trauma other than prenatal exposure, and she is now 6. Here is a minor example, but one that has been hard to solve. We have a rule that before dinner we pick up toys. She throws a fit most days. This is a typical scenario. I give her a 10-minute warning that we will be picking up toys, and I set a timer. We eat dinner soon after the toys are picked up, so she has an incentive to do it. When the timer goes off, I start to help her pick up her toys. She argues or dawdles, letting me do most of the work. She dawdles, letting me do most of the work. If I stop until she starts to help, she gets angry. Or if I start to fuss, she explodes. If I stop helping her but tell her that she can't have dinner until the toys are picked up, she screams the entire time we are having dinner, ruining dinner for everyone else. I don't let her get too many toys out at one time so that there isn't a huge mess to clean up, but her reaction doesn't seem to depend upon the amount of mess. I find that I start to get a knot in my stomach every afternoon because I know that I'm going to have to fight this battle every single day. I have lost it and took all of her toys away for a week, but when she had them again, the problem began again. Any help with this specific problem or with the general problem of her flying off the handle every time she is asked to do something that she doesn't want to do would be greatly appreciated. All right. Well, I think Doreen is one thing I did want to point out that I thought was interesting here is that it's important to realize that trauma can take many forms. In other words, in this case, as far as Doreen's daughter was adopted at birth, but she did have prenatal exposure, which I think it's fair to note would be prenatal trauma. Anyway, I just think that's important to state at the beginning that when we say that this behavior is often accompanies children who've experienced trauma can take many scenarios. All right,
yes.
Cameka, let's begin with you. All right, what would be some of the things if you were working with Doreen? It seems to me Doreen's done a lot of the smart things. Keep the mess to a minimum, have an incentive at the other end, help it working with her while she's supposed to pick up. She's doing a lot of the things that I would normally have thought. So thoughts on what we could, specific things we could suggest for Doreen?
First off, I'd like to tell Doreen that she's doing an excellent job, that there is not something that she is doing wrong. If there is anything that I could suggest adding would be really before your day is started, I really think that they should work on regulation. It sounds like throughout the day, there are lots of times where the child might not be regulated and needs to be taught how to first co-regulate with mom and then learn to self-regulate by herself. And so it sounds like if she's able to go from 0 to 60, I really would suggest learning how to regulate with your daughter at least every hour to 2 hours. And never go beyond that, so that when it is time for those transition things, she understands what it's going to look like to regulate with you or to regulate by herself. It really does sound like she is out of sync throughout the day.
It
so
does.
that
Can you
is
give
something.
me an example of what regulating with your child would look like? What do you mean by that?
Well, some of the things that I teach parents to do is just identifying what our feelings are. So first, it is simply just throughout the day identifying what your feelings are, as well as teaching the child to deep breathe. One of the things that I think the smaller kids really enjoy is the candle blowing. And it's not really a candle. It's truly just holding out your 5 fingers and blowing each finger out, taking deep breaths, making sure that that child is touching that tummy and really feeling what it feels like to have that stomach go in and have it come out. And then being able at the end of that to say, yes, I feel better, or yes, I feel a little bit different. Being able to identify what that different is. They're small, so they're not going to be able to say, hey, I totally feel relaxed on the inside. My body is just calm. Of course, they won't be able to do that, but she will be able to explain to you in some way, shape, or form, whichever her language is, how she is feeling different. And you'll even see it in her behavior. You'll see it in her eyes. You'll see it in her muscle tone. Everything will look very different than what it looked before. And so that's how you know that your kiddo is regulated. And you do that with them. And then when they're ready to self-regulate by themselves, you can send them. They can have a special spot in your home that is just for them and has just their things in it. I love to call it my area, sometimes calm down areas, however they want to see it, but refrain from anything that could be negative, causing them to have like a negative attachment to that space. But literally just allowing them to go there in their own special area and just really calming themselves. So I hope that answers your question, but that is something that is so important that needs to happen immediately with this family.
So working on regulation from throughout the day, in particular when the child is not escalating, by identifying, how are you feeling now? Or it looks to me like you're feeling excited, or it seems like you're getting frustrated, and doing even pictures of the little pictures of children feeling different emotions, or the little emojis of a smile or a frown or a steam coming out of your head type of thing, and having the child use that to identify her responses. Okay, Jennifer, thoughts on ways that we might be able to help Doreen with her little girl?
Sure, and all those tips that Cameka gave are great as well. And one thing I thought about when she was talking about the blowing out the candle activity, because that deep breathing is important, and sometimes it's helpful for mom and dad to breathe along with the child too.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's a great, I think it was produced through Sesame Street, I believe, but it's just called Belly Breathing with Elmo, and it's a fun song. You can Google and find it very easily, and it's just a fun song for kids to kind of sing along, and it teaches them some of those great deep breathing techniques. But I think also you brought up a great point, which is kind of planning for these meltdowns and these challenges, and I think just being proactive when the child is calm and when you're not in at the grocery store having a meltdown, and so that's when you really want to practice some of these just kind of scripts, being gentle and kind, showing respect, listen and obey, cooperate and compromise, just kind of going through and practicing some of those, and even playing games that are going to encourage compliance. Something as simple as just red light, green light, and some of those mirroring games where the child has to cooperate and compromise to kind of play the games, but it's teaching them compliance in a fun, in a fun way. And that way, when you're practicing some of those things, then when it is in the midst of a meltdown, they sort of have that routine and know what to expect from their parent. And it makes it more likely that they are gonna cooperate.
It seems to me in this scenario too that there is an advantage here, that because this is happening with certain regularity, and hang with me here, I realize that from Doreen's standpoint this is not an advantage, but in fact, far from it. But because it's happening with some regularity, it allows her to anticipate that it's going to happen, so she can start some techniques ahead of time. And the other thing that jumped out to me when I was reading Doreen's comment, I think that a lot of times children, particularly kids who've experienced trauma, have trouble with transitions. And there's the unmet need. If we're looking for a need here, it seems to me that Doreen's daughter is really struggling with, potentially, and I don't know this, of course, I'm guessing, but it sounds like in this particular scenario she's struggling with stopping play and moving on to another activity, which dinner and the unwinding of a day, and that it might help if that she anticipates that this is going to be a difficult transition, and then so not put it at the end of the day. Don't pick up the toys 3 hours before dinner, and then have outdoor play where there isn't a transition. Now that you still have a transition to coming in, or if the family allows screen time, use their 1 hour of screen time a day to start an hour before this would begin, so that the transition is into screen time, and then when the show is over, some strategies along those lines that shifts the transition to a different time of day when that there isn't a pickup, something that is difficult for her daughter to do. that might be a practical thing.
Yeah,
All
those
right.
transitions are really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing, and we'll come back to it, but I do want to. Well, I'll raise this as a different. Let me read a different scenario. This is one that Cameka you sent in as something that you see. A child refuses to get out of bed to shower and dress. The child then cries, screams, and yells for up to 45 minutes. After multiple redirects and offers to assist, the child then becomes more frustrated and becomes physically aggressive. The child gets out of bed and begins hitting the parents with the shoe and crying for an additional 10 minutes. Oh, boy, this is a tough one. All right. So, Jennifer, now we've got a child who is, this is first thing in the morning. So there is a transition going on, but it's a transition from out of bed to begin the day. So thoughts on applying some of the core practices. What can we do to help a child who is not only struggling and escalating, but also is becoming physically aggressive?
I think that important, sometimes looking at nutritional things that might be going on when they get up first thing in the morning. Do they need a little snack or some hydration? Could they have water by their bed? Are they needing just to kind of have a morning ritual where, first thing in the morning we're going to get prepared for the day. Can I, lay beside you and snuggle, or can we, look at a book together? And I know some of those things don't sound practical as a parent, because you're going, we have this amount of time and we've got to get to school and work, and I know that sounds really hard, but after some time of kind of sticking to a strict routine, because children need that routine and consistency, and they feel safe when they know what to expect. They know every morning, Dad comes in and tickles my feet, and we laugh and have just a fun time, waking up and getting ready for the day. Just some of those rituals that they know to expect, every morning can be really helpful. And just having something I like to do with children that struggle with kind of some of those transitions throughout the day, or become frustrated or aggressive even when they're told, no, we can't do that right now, is letting them come up with their own schedule. I mean, within some boundaries, but writing out what they think, with help. If it's a child that needs some help, so they can kind of tell you what their task for the day might want to be, and kind of come up with a plan, and everybody can sign it and can be part of it. So it's a little bit of shared power, and really just asking what they're needing. And
perhaps in this case, giving the child the option to shower at night, and maybe every other day. I don't know if shower is the issue, but I think especially if a parent has in their head that the way they want to start their day is to get up and shower because that's what they do, that in fact, a shower at night works just as well. And so giving the child, this goes back to your compromise and letting the child set their own schedule up to a point, and but also offering a compromise. If it sounds like you're having a hard time with taking a shower in the morning, would you rather take one at night?
Yeah, exactly. And looking at what's going to prevent this meltdown, and if it's easier to take that shower at night, and that creates less stress in the morning and in their morning routine, then yeah, and that's something that is a compromise that would be okay.
Okay, so we've talked about ideas for preventing, but what about it when you're in the midst? Okay, Cameka, you're the mother who's gone in, and this child is screaming and yelling and now is throwing a shoe at you. So what can you do in the midst when this kid is getting totally out of control? Not necessarily to prevent, because at this point prevention is thanks. It's not going to help me any right now. What do I do to get this child calm?
Right.
I think
right.
Go ahead,
Cameka.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Cameka.
Okay. For me, I think that something that I would suggest to a family member that would be going through something like this would be to be present. It's super important to not engage sometimes with children who have become aggressive. So when I say engage, I mean asking lots of questions. I think that might confuse and or irritate a child even more. And so I always tell parents to avoid doing things like that, to avoid touching them, to avoid asking lots of questions. Sometimes a child just needs someone to be present. And when they are able to kind of calm themselves down is when you go in and you offer that assistance. But in the moment, it does no one any good to ask a lot of questions to try to figure out how to make them better or how to make the situation better. It does no good to try to rush the situation along because we know that we have school to get to or we know that I have work to get to. It just does no good. At the end of the day, we sometimes need to accept the situation for what it is. We need to accept that at this moment I'm going to be late to work or this child is going to be late to school. And once you're okay with that, it makes it easier for you to be able to accept the situation that's happening right then and there and be present in that moment and be a little bit more able to connect with that child so that child can calm down. And if you notice, like sometimes parents will be there in that moment and they might start picking up the clothes that the child might have left on the floor or, removing shoes or things that's on the floor, and it distracts that child from how they're actually feeling and catches their attention to where they're focusing more on what you're doing with their things or it might even motivate them to come and help pick up some of the things. So there's lots of things that you could do in that moment, but the worst thing that I've seen parents do is try to rush along the situation or engage them where a negative outcome is going to come from that, especially when they're aggressive.
So what about leaving the child in the room and shutting the door and walking away?
I definitely don't recommend that. Again, TBRI is all about connectedness, and no child is able to connect when they are alone. A child you need to be present with your child so that they are able to connect at any moment when they need to. You don't have to be there to engage, but I do not recommend leaving a child and closing the door. You need to make sure that the child is safe in their environment, and you need to create that safety for them. And so that's why I do recommend some of the parents, especially when there is aggression, that you do start to pick up the things that are on the floor. You do start to remove those things from reach of the child so that they remain safe and you remain safe as well.
Okay. Let's see. One of the things that we could throw in is a little quick discussion of self-care. As a parent, I think, Jennifer, you were the one who mentioned about it doesn't hurt for the parents to do the deep breathing as well. And I was laughing and thinking you are absolutely right that one of the things that in the midst of a child who is screaming and yelling over what seems to us is something inconsequential, being asked to get out of bed, and then starts to throw things at you, one of the things that it's really hard to do is to breathe. To deep breathe, to calm yourself because, your fight or flight is kicking in as well. And your anger and your, all of that so breathing deep, counting to 5, taking some of those, imagining, or maybe even, I don't know, would it make sense to hold your hand up and blow out the candles for yourself, depending on the age of the child, if they wouldn't think that was being condescending, to show that maybe it's deep breathing so the child will see that you are calming yourself. Thoughts on that one, Jennifer?
Yes. No, I think it is. It's very needed, and that's something that gets often lost, is what the self-care needs are of the parents, yes. Because we need support, and I think it's important to have just friends that you can kind of lean on for that support, to know that you are not the only one out there experiencing, children with challenging behaviors, and that you're not alone. Having that support is important. And if even if you don't have a great group of friends, reaching out and finding a support group, or looking for a therapist who can kind of help you work through some of that. And also, I think something that's really not only important but can be very powerful for parents is to explore their own attachment needs. What's that looked like for them, growing up in their childhood, and why sometimes we start to feel our hearts racing and not understanding, what is causing this anxiety in me when my child is melting down and throwing shoes at me. Where is this coming from? And exploring some of those things within ourselves help us really just approach things differently. And I think that's really important, and it gets lost a lot in our busy lives, is really slowing down and what can I do that's going to meet some of my needs, whether that's having some set quiet time every week, or just a night out, doing something that's going to benefit you health-wise. Some yoga and deep breathing, just going for a walk. Sometimes something as little as just 5 minutes of a break is really helpful to kind of get you back, and is encouraging, so that you can really kind of look at what's going on with your child. Sometimes we just need that little breather ourselves, and it's helpful.
Amen. We tell people that the single best thing you can do for your child is take care of yourself, and we're real specific. I mean, do something every day that brings you joy. It can be small. It can mean be looking forward to binging on at the end of the day on the latest episode of whatever show you're watching on Netflix, or going out for a walk, or cuddling up with your husband on the couch. And the other thing you said that I want to circle back to is the overwhelming importance of support. Parenting kids who've experienced trauma is hard. It just is.
Yes.
And our moms and our sisters and our best friends are often not people we can turn to for support, other than just general support, because they've never experienced it. And sadly, sometimes it's the parents who are also judged. It's, if you had just cracked the whip a little, Junior wouldn't be acting that way. And just the reaching out, and if you are fortunate to live where there is an in-person support group, hallelujah, praise the Lord. If you are not, then reach out online. There are so many support groups, and the advantage of an online support group is they're 24/7. And one such support group is the Creating a Family support group. It's a closed Facebook support group. It's large, and I guarantee that there is not a single scenario you have experienced that there isn't somebody else who's experienced something similar and will come back. But there is also Facebook support groups specific to parents who are trying to apply the TBRI or the attachment parenting, connected parenting approach. So just start doing some Googling, and if you are struggling with your helping your child regulate and de-escalate, one of the first the action points from listening to this is going to be to make certain you're doing something you enjoy every day that fills you up a little, because you're giving a lot. And the second thing is find some support. Come heck or high water, find a way. In person is great, but it's not an either or. If you don't have in person, or even if you do, make sure you're getting some online support. All right, let me read the next one. This is from Renee. She said, my child threw a fit when we were on vacation and arrived at the hotel for check-in. She was tired and hungry, but instead of taking the snack that we offered, she threw her drink at her dad and flailed on the ground, screaming and crying. Luckily for us, the hotel just assumed the tired child and didn't force us to prove parentage at the time, but it could have been a much bigger situation. This scenario seems to bring to the fore identifying triggers. So let's talk a little about that, Cameka. In this case, the mom, I think, has identified perhaps accurately a tired and hungry child, but that is certainly hunger and exhaustion are certainly major triggers. What are some other triggers that we can see before we start giving specific ways that Renee could handle this when in the moment?
Oh, I definitely can see, especially when we're on vacation. I can just identify with myself. If we are on vacation and I spent 4 to 8 to 12 hours in a car off and on, I could be pretty irritated by the time we get to our destination and not be very compliant with having my needs met, regardless of if I know I'm hungry or thirsty or anything.
Exactly.
My trigger would definitely, I'm at that point where I've reached my threshold and my lid is definitely blown. So I think the same.
You might throw it, huh? Okay, got it. Okay.
So I can definitely see. Those are triggers just in themselves, and then also being able to understand this mom did perfect. She understood exactly what her kiddo needed. That her kiddo needed that drink. Her kiddo needed that snack, but she was just not in a place to accept that. So we've gone over the list of triggers. We've identified what could be of help to her. But then here lies the problem where the child was not accepting of that. And I hate to, harp on the same thing, but we need to come to a point where we're accepting, we know our child, and we're accepting of the fact that there will be times where our child will act out in public. And I think just being able to bring that child into you and stop in that moment, maybe allowing dad to go and check the family into the hotel and mom taking that child over to the side and just holding her and rocking her and getting her to a point where she is calm and she's able to say, okay, I'm ready to have that need met. I'm ready for that cup where I can have juice and I can have my need met. It's really just, again, I hate to go back to it, but it is just regulating with that child and getting them to a point to where they can accept to have their needs met.
So getting on that, but this is it's good to say the same things because it's applying the principles. So getting on the child's level. In this case, the child is on the floor, so perhaps a mom sitting on the floor. And would you ask the child's permission? May I hug you? May I touch you? May I try to help you calm?
Absolutely. I would definitely ask the child, can Mama pick you up? Can Mama pick you up and hold you and rock you? I know that makes me feel better type thing. Just be calm and soothing. Your voice needs to be very calm and soothing. And don't be tense in your approach. Make sure that you are relaxed and ready to help that child and not. I'm telling you, kids can read your body language. So when you approach them, you need to be at a point where you're relaxed because they can feel that your body language is accepting towards them.
And let me, before we move off from this one, let me just say a couple of other possible triggers in this scenario are a lack of routine. Jennifer had pointed out at the beginning that children, particularly children who have experienced trauma, need a lot of routine. And so travel is nothing. One of the reasons we do travel is to get rid of our routine. But for certain kids, that is just so darn hard. And also, lack of physical activity. I mean, I don't know in particular where Renee was coming from, but, had they been in a car for a long time? And, again, this is more on the preventative, but perhaps stopping every 2 hours. We always traveled with toys that could be thrown and caught type of things, not balls because they tended to roll. But and we stopped at and had the kids run so that there was some physical activity, trying to establish keep to some of the rough routines from home, particularly if you have a child who becomes deregulated when they don't have the routine. We also have a question that I wanted to read now from Jason that fits directly in this. And Jason says, can you help us with how to de-escalate a fit when being thrown in public? And that's similar to Renee's situation. And Jennifer, one of the things that's just real is that you're embarrassed. If Renee is, I'm not speaking for her, but I'm putting myself in her scenario. I'm checking in and my child is, threw a drink, for gracious sakes, and is now screaming on the floor. I feel embarrassed. I feel that I am being judged. When my kid throws a fit in the aisle of the grocery store, I know that people are going, this is the problem with today's parents. They don't know how to set the law. In my generation, it wouldn't have happened, or with my kids, it wouldn't happen. And we know they're thinking that, and they are. So I'm embarrassed. So let's be honest, how does embarrassment play, and what do I do as I'm sitting there with my face red and I'm, knowing that I'm winning the award for Bad Mom of the Year?
Right. And that is hard. And I think, we've probably all been in similar situations. And that's when you start going through, all these strategies that I've been given and nothing is working, and what do I do now? And I think something that's important to remember too is strategies can be offered, but sometimes what works for one child may not work for another, and that behavior is not always, willful or purposeful. Like you were saying before, that structure, and going back to that vacation scenario, it's that structure provides, the predictability of kind of what's going to happen and what's going to expect. And it can be very embarrassing as a parent, because it looks like, I can't manage my child, and kind of, what do we do? And I think Cameka brought up a really good point earlier, a couple of things, talking about just rocking that child. I think we tend to take some of those rhythmic experiences for granted. We forget how important it is in early development just to rock our children, to walk with them, how those patterns really are so calming. And sometimes, in that situation where your child is just screaming and throwing things, and you're out in public and not sure what to do, it's okay. It's okay to just jump ship and say, you know what, you have to be all right with, I can't finish this errand today, and I need to give you what you need. And so let's go home. And whether that's needing a little bit of that jumping on a trampoline or something, an activity, and I know that's hard when you're wanting to get errands done and need to get some things done for the day. And it's hard to say, I may just not be able to finish. Or if it's a possibility, if you're out in public, being able to just walk away somewhere quiet, go out to the car for a little bit for a break, just to get a drink or listen to some music. And I know so often it's easier said than done, and it does feel embarrassing. And depending on the situation. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think sometimes acknowledging the fact that my child is struggling, that sometimes it's helpful to remind yourself that as inappropriate as their behavior is, they are trying to meet a need. They're trying to problem solve. They are trying to do, and it's not a very good way that they're doing. It's not a very effective way, but that it's not them trying to push our buttons. It's not them trying to embarrass us. It is them doing, and sometimes I could so distinctly remember one time I was just having a horrible day and everything that could go wrong, and my reaction to it was poor. And I turned around to my kids and I said, guys, believe it or not, right now this is the best I can do. My son said, well, it's not very good. And I said, you're right, it isn't. You're right. But this right now, I'm doing the best I can. And it really isn't very good. And I hope it set a message to them that, sometimes we all try, and it helps to remember. What it helped me by saying that was to remember when my kids were acting really poorly, that at that exact moment, that was the best that my kid could do. And somehow that took some of it. Didn't take the sting of the embarrassment away, but if it was happening in public, but it put me in a better mental frame to realize that, wait a minute, I have also not. I've also my best wasn't very good, and right now their best isn't very good, but it's still their best. So something to
Can I ask,
us to keep in mind. Yeah, please.
Me being a parent, I have children in my home. I've been a teacher, and I've been in some of those anxiety-driven moments. And one of the best things that works so well that I teach some of my parents is teaching them how to ground themselves in the moment so that they can remain in control of themselves. And so I always try to help parents understand that while you're holding and rocking that child, you too can be using your own coping strategies to deal with that. And so just being in tune with what's around you, making sure that you're looking at 5 things that you see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. It's so helpful in bringing down that anxiety level so that you're still able to have your need met as well as meet the needs of the child.
Let's actually take that. I love that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's say that my child, we've gone grocery shopping, and the child wants to get something off of, of course they put all the, the crappy cereal on we're in the child's level, and the child wants it. I say no. We're going to get the healthier cereal, and the child is starting to escalate. I see the kid beginning to escalate. I know that, I know where this is going to. What can I do right at that moment to ground myself? Because I feel as a parent, I know that this is going to get bad. She's going to start screaming. She's going to really lose control. Walk me through just an example of how that would look in real life. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, you would have to do it very quickly in that situation. But
okay.
Literally, I might not do the whole thing. I might start out with something that's just quick, grounding myself quickly. What do I see that would make me feel comfortable? And to me, that's colors. Colors are something that I can identify very quickly, especially when you're in a situation like that. I quickly go to something that is familiar with me, and it brings up sensory inside of me that is calming. Something that's connected to a good memory. And in therapy, especially as Jennifer said, it's important to do therapy and be in tune with yourself so that when you're in those, when you're going into your own flight or fright type situations, you are able to identify, okay, this color means this to me. It's connected to this memory. I'm able to calm down quickly and be able to meet my child's need. And so if that is something that I would do, that is something that I would do immediately, would be to be able to meet my own need by grounding in that moment so that I can quickly get to my child and help them regulate through that situation.
Okay. And I would throw out, for me, deep breathing, and sometimes putting my hand on my stomach so that I actually feel my diaphragm moving out, reminding me to breathe deep, is something that doesn't always calm me, but it just as I feel that when that knot in your stomach begins. Now, let's say that you've gotten your child is now on the floor and is screaming, and you have accepted that the shopping trip is going to probably be aborted, and you are on the floor and you've asked with your child, and you've asked and you've picked a child up and are now rocking. Can you walk through a little more slowly the I think you said 5 things to see, 4 things to smell, or so walk me through that again.
Okay. Well, in that moment,
child. Yeah, I've got a little more time
yes.
now.
In that moment, you have your child, and you are rocking, making sure that you're in some type of steady rhythm when you're rocking with them, and that just means sometimes parents do a shh, 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 something where that voice, it to me, it imitates being in mommy's tummy. That's somewhere that's safe, close, and you've got them close to you. At that moment is when I would start looking around at some things that I can identify, some things that come to me quickly with a good positive memory connected to it. And so, I mean, at this point, it's easy to just draw from anything. You have a lot of life experiences, so make sure that when you're looking at your 5 things that you see, that you connect it with a positive memory. And the same goes for something that I can touch. You might not be able to touch it in that moment, but you have some memory that is connected with it that you can actually remember touching it, and it has some type of positive memory connected with it. Same thing goes for hearing, and you can use what you're doing. You can use the sound that you're doing right now with calming your child. Something that you can smell. Be in tune with what's around you that smells good. You're in a grocery store. Lemons are something that is helpful to me. Bakery, lots of things that you just have to be in tune with what you're smelling as well. And taste. Think about what that favorite meal is that you wanted to prepare that week and what that's going to taste like for you, what that's going to feel like when you're eating that meal. Those are things with just being in tune with your body.
Okay, and it's something that comes to mind that I think people are probably thinking now. Are we on some level encouraging poor behavior? I go back to Doreen's example where her daughter is refusing to pick up, and in a way, she's getting away with it. Or the scenario where the child doesn't want to get out of bed and is hitting and screaming and perhaps is wanting to avoid school, maybe one of, and in fact ends up late at school. Or the Renee scenario where her child has actually thrown a drink at her father, inappropriate. So, so how do we connect with our children, help them de-escalate, but also teach proper behavior? Are we not encouraging poor behavior by not addressing the poor behavior that is going on during these escalation moments?
For me, no, I don't think so. I think that it's important to always go back after your child is calm, after you are calm, and talk about what has happened and repair that situation, and offer times for redos, and teach them in that moment, hey, I recognize that children will come back and say, I shouldn't have done that. Well, you're probably right. Son, what would you do different in that moment? Next time when we're out in the store, what would you do different? And walking them through the scenario and teaching them. And if a parent is strong enough and they've dealt with it long enough, wait it out sometimes. Sometimes it's okay to wait it out. As your child understands and starts to self-regulate, the tantrums or the behaviors are not as long or as intense, and you're able in that moment to teach them what they can do different or help them problem solve through that situation so that they can come out to a solution that they want, that they're not able to get to because their behavior is stopping them from being able to do so.
So let me make sure I'm understanding. Which after the fact, we'll use Renee's scenario. The child has been calmed. They have checked into their room. Are you suggesting that after the fact that you would sit down with your child and talk about and say, how could you have done? What could you do different? Is that what you mean when you say a redo?
Yes. So redos can be totally two different things. So when I say that, I mean we can sit down and we can point out, I noticed that you were upset and you threw your drink at Daddy, and it probably hurt Daddy. Is there a way that you could have handled that situation different? What can we do different when we're upset or we're tired or we're hungry? And help them be able, at their level, of course, help them be able to process through that and come to a solution of how they would do things differently. And then being able to go back and actually redo it. Don't be afraid to go down to the lobby where that incident happened and your child be able to, at that moment, say, oh, my gosh, let's pretend that this is Daddy and you're tired and you're sick. Or I'm sorry, not sick, but you're tired and you're sleepy, or you're tired and you're hungry and you want something from us, but we're not able to accept it at that moment. How would you do it different? What could we do different? You can make it as playful as you want to, but you have to go back and teach within that moment so that the next time that it happens, it doesn't happen the way that it happened before. Or if it does happen again, it's not as intense as it was before. Just try to use every moment possible to reteach a desired behavior that you want from your child.
So in the store example, Jennifer, how would be the example where the child wants the Lucky Charms or whatever, and you don't want to, and throws a fit? What would be an example of a redo, Jennifer, for that scenario?
Right. Well, a couple of things, because I hear that often, that sometimes it can feel permissive, and I think doing those redos really are what is going to kind of hold that child accountable for their behavior, and that is important. And I think it's important to go back after the fact and say, okay, look, I know you really wanted that cereal. What is a way that you think you could have asked for that without screaming in my face or without kicking me? And I think the other thing that's really important to remember is there is a lot of power in yes. And that does not mean that we tell our children yes to every request they want, because that's not life, and sometimes the answer is just going to be no. But if we can give them that answer without, using the word no, because often a child who has trouble regulating, they hear no and then they hear nothing else. They shut down, and that's when they go to the floor and start screaming. And so if we, when they're pointing out, I want the Cocoa Puffs, rather than saying, no, we're not getting those today, try, oh, wait a minute, I see Rice Krispies and Raisin Bran. Which one of these would you like? Offer a compromise. And there's going to be days where that doesn't even work. And sometimes, they're not going to want any of the choices that you're giving them. And that's when sometimes it's easier at that point to just remove them from the situation. But it is important to go back and even just using puppets and have them practice asking for the cereal disrespectfully. And they think it's funny and they start giggling, and it's like, well, ask for those pops in your mean voice, and then they can practice with the puppet saying it disrespectfully. Now show me how to ask for cereal respectfully, and giving them those chances to practice, and that way it becomes more of a routine. And I think the goal is just to teach your child while staying connected with them. That way they can trust you, that sometimes when the answer is just no, it doesn't result in as big of, a meltdown.
I love the idea of using puppets. We did that not infrequently, and it feels like a safe way of going back and redoing the situation. And you're right, there can always be some silliness, which that goes back to the introducing a lightness and the playfulness when we're working with kids who can sometimes be challenging.
Yes.
The other thing, this again comes back more to the prevention, not the handling in the moment, but one thing that you, I don't remember which of you mentioned, I think it was you, Jennifer, at the beginning, is thinking in terms of teaching compromise. And an example of that in this scenario of the pitching a fit in the grocery store is over Cocoa Puffs would be that I think as parents we sometimes think that if we compromise with our children that we are being lenient, that we're giving in. But in this scenario, if you think about it, okay, why do you not want the kids to have Cocoa Puffs? Well, it's because it's trash and it's pure sugar or whatever. But is there one day a week that you have dessert? And if so, could you say, well, I don't want Cocoa Puffs in the morning because it's, let's look how much sugar is in it. Oh, why? 50% sugar or whatever it is. And, your body can't grow on 50% sugar first thing in the morning. But you know what? After a meal on family night on Friday night, we always have ice cream. What if this week we have Cocoa Puffs? And we'll get, that type of teach a compromise or offer a compromise, which is a way of teaching a compromise. Jennifer, would that be effective?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a wonderful compromise, and then you're also, validating that you hear that they want those Cocoa Puffs, and that's something that the parent is okay with, and that might be great for the child too. Yeah, that's a wonderful compromise, and sometimes if there isn't a compromise, it's okay to just say, I know it hurts when you can't have what you want, and I love you, and rather than responding in anger, but no, that's a great compromise, letting them have that as a dessert, and I think so it's just I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when we talked about redo, we talked about a actual redo of the scenario, walking after the child has completely calmed down, going back through the aisle after and we've talked to the kid about more appropriate ways to ask and all that type of stuff. So that's one type of redo. Another type of redo is after the fact, going to the same location and talking about the scenario and what they could have done different. Another one is acting it out after the fact of a mommy and her mommy puppet or a mommy stuffed animal going grocery shopping with her, little stuffed animal. So all of those, and then there's then the last one, which I believe Cameka had talked about, was the talking about it, redoing it verbally about what are some other things. So those are all opportunities for redo. But what about if a child has hurt in some way another person, Renee's daughter throwing the drink, Doreen's daughter ruining everybody's dinner. What about the concept of making amends after the fact? Is that something that fits into the TBRI philosophy? If you have harmed, then you come up with a way to make amends. Cameka, is that something that would address the feeling that some people have that this approach is basically letting kids get away with poor behavior?
No, well, I definitely, we call that repairing, and that means just repairing the situation. And for instance, if the baby hit daddy with the cup, that would be going to apologize to Daddy and saying, Daddy, I'm sorry that I hurt you, or even going, and if the child is small, even taking that child and going over to Daddy and showing that child where that cup hit Daddy and having Daddy say, ow, that really hurt, and the child being able to see what empathy looks like, being able to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you type situation. And even if us parents, we might handle situations bad, we might need to repair at that moment as well. We might need to say, I'm sorry for Mommy handled that totally wrong. Exactly. And if Mommy was in a better state, I would have done it like this. So next time, this is what I'm making a commitment to try to do it this way. And you're teaching them at that moment. You're repairing, you're teaching them, and you're leading by example. So there are always opportunities for you to help your child repair, for you to repair a situation. Repairs can go both ways.
So redo and repair are just as important after the fact as how we handle it in the moment once a child has escalated. So we've talked about a couple of things in this hour. We've talked about recognizing the triggers ahead of time, so that's preventative, trying to understand, establishing routines, making sure our children are rested and fed, and trying to understand the need that they have and trying to meet it in a healthy way so as to prevent. Modeling compromise, modeling regulation, identifying feelings, talking and asking for what we need. And so all of that is on the preventative. Then we've talked about, in the midst of an escalation, doing everything we can to help the child regulate and not further the escalation, not engaging with the child, asking permission before you touch, getting on the child's level when we're and focusing, trying to, as best we can, focus on their preciousness in that moment, which I'll grant you is awfully difficult. But getting in, and so that's handling, and sometimes, quite frankly, just accepting the reality that we're going to be late, or we're not going to get our grocery shopping done, or all the plans for the day have been shot. Just accepting that and doing your best to regulate yourself, and then the whole idea of self-care we've talked about, being very important on the preventative, quite frankly. Self-care for parents is preventative, falls in the preventative. But then after the fact, after a child has had an incident, going back and giving them the opportunity to redo and repair, and doing it in a respectful way and not a punitive way, because we're trying to teach. Let's see, Cameka, has that a fairly good summary of all that we have covered?
Yes, that pretty much sums it up.
Okay. I will give you each one last chance. Is there anything else you would like to tell parents who are facing a child who escalates and are trying to figure out de-escalation? Any last, I'll let you, Cameka, have the last word here. Any last words of wisdom?
If there is anything that I could walk away with trying to remind parents to do, is parenting, although it's hard, it is truly a joy. Being blessed with children, we're able to serve that child, and picking out every moment at the end of your day, something positive that took place. Look at something that you say, this was a change. And even if it is so tiny, but being able to look at that tiny, tiny improvement and being okay with that, and having playful moments throughout the day with your child, no matter how short it is or how long it is, just being able to enjoy those. It makes getting up and doing it the next day worth it.
Oh, you are. I couldn't agree with you more on everything, especially the thinking of one thing that child did, one thing. And sometimes it helps when they're asleep to be thinking of it while you look at them looking so angelic, and trying to remember the one thing, and then adding a little bit of lightness at some point, something that helps you remember that this child is an enjoyable human being. And that we are fortunate to be able to be this child's parent. Thank you so much, Cameka Hart and Jennifer McCallum, both from Buckner Children and Family Services, for being with us today. Let me remind everybody that the intent of this is to provide general advice to understand how to apply it to your specific situation. You need to work with your adoption professional. Thank you so much for being with us today. Let me also take a moment to remind everyone that this show is brought to you by the support of our partners who believe in what we do, and what we do are things like this show, helping parents understand how to be better parents. One of our wonderful partners is Spence Chapin. They are a licensed and accredited nonprofit organization in the New York City metro area that has been offering adoption services for over, get this, 100 years. Wow. They have a robust post-adoption service provided to all parts of the triad, birth parents, adoptive parents, and adoptees. And they really stand behind the idea that they are with you. Adoption is a lifelong journey, and they are in it from the beginning until the end. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today, and I will see you next week.
Now at the Home Depot, save up to 35% off appliance special buys, like the Samsung stainless steel side-by-side refrigerator, just $9.98. You save $300. It's big enough to hold 25 bags of groceries. Unload those, and if that makes you thirsty, you'll really love the external ice maker and water dispenser. Today is the day for doing. Spring Black Friday savings now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only while supplies last. See store for details. Valid through April 17th.
Come to the Home Depot this month and you'll learn a thing or two. Actually, 3, with 3 free do-it-yourself workshops. Learn how to design and care for your container garden by selecting the best soil and aesthetically arranging your plants. Learn how to install tile flooring, even how to keep your outdoor deck and patio space in the best shape possible. See, it's never too late to learn something new. Register today at homedepot.com/workshops for a do-it-yourself workshop near you. Only at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing.